Darrin, we had a heated promo exchange with Jon Moxley and Swerve Strickland tonight. A lot of tension, and in the end, I was kind of happy we did not see a fight break out. I actually thought it was the tension of a fight ended up meaning more than if there had been a fight.
Yeah. Thought it was paced very well. They didn't give away too much. You still have a couple of weeks to go before the pay-per-view. And yeah, I'm glad they did not have physicality. Gave it a little chance to breathe. And both guys were very effective in that. I really enjoyed that segment.
Yeah. And it was interesting. It was the talking points I thought were really effective between the two of them. Moxley got to kind of go back a little bit to what he's been talking about with the line about the billionaires and talent agencies taking up pro wrestling. And Swerve, you're somebody who I thought would make it all worthwhile for me, all the sacrifice, but now I'm starting to doubt that. And so Moxley kind of got to go back to part of the character that has been driving him recently. And then Swerve just had the whole crowd with him the whole time. What stood out to you that you liked?
I liked that the crowd was definitely behind Swerve. It was no doubt about that. I also liked what's the point I was making? That Swerve at one point in the promo was talking about he's the guy that's going to outsmart Moxley. And that really plays into his character as a guy that would be wiser than maybe some of the other characters, and that he wasn't going to be the guy that got jumped. And that was one big thing that stood out from me. And he had Willow come out to have his back because he knew the other members would be there. It makes you wonder some of the other times, like, don't you guys have friends? And sometimes we kind of discussed that. And so finally, someone was smart enough to beat Moxley at his own game. So that really stood out to me as well as a big part of it. But two big compelling characters sharing some ring time. And I'm, again, going back to it, I'm glad that they didn't brawl. And I'm sure we'll have that before it's all said and done. But a very, very good segment.
Yeah, and it set up a mixed tag match next week or on Dynamite, which is adding to some tension and build leading into the event. I think one of the lines that I thought was good and worth highlighting here too was when Swerve brought up that Moxley doesn't have the belt, that he hasn't shown the belt outside of the briefcase. And he said that's because you don't believe that you can look at the belt and live with yourself as the champion that you've been. He made it sound as if, Moxley kind of does it out of like self-editing guilt over what he's become and that he isn't a worthy champion. Because that is sort of like an ongoing thing. Well, we don't see Moxley with a belt. I don't know ultimately if it's going to seem like it was worth having this much time go by, not seeing the title belt, but I like that Swerve brought it up and had his theory on why that is happening.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a payoff of why that thing's been in the briefcase all this time, but I suppose we'll see. I'm not really expecting much to be revealed. It's just going to be in there, I suppose. I don't see them prolonging it, but yeah, that's one thing I can't really figure out. But yeah, kind of. I had another point about Swerve, which my mind is gone.
That's all right. There's a couple other things about that. One, I thought that those two came across having gravitas, having star power. And I say that a little bit in contrast to Kenny Omega earlier in the night, who had kind of an adorable nerdy charm to him and Speedball interacting with each other, but it was, the syntax was weird. The points that Omega was making were not always bad syntax. I'm doing the same thing. It didn't always make sense. Things didn't flow. We talked about Tony Khan putting his name on the dotted line in a way that made it sound like Tony Khan was signing a contract, and a variety of other things that were just sort of weird. But I sort of argued I'd rather have I'd rather have Kenny Omega be Kenny instead of hiding him, and let's lean into who he is and where he is at this stage of his career. And so that worked, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I also want them to lean into who Swerve is and who Moxley is, and they are the cool wrestlers right now at the top of the AEW card. And so to me, this was AEW when they had the kind of the cool. We had a graphic on our YouTube channel a couple months back. Almost, AEW have they lost their cool factor? And this was when we had Jeff Jarrett as a centerpiece. and we pointed out a few other things. It was the Pointer Sisters week. And I think AEW's got it back. This was the biggest crowd they've had for Dynamite all year in St. Paul, Minnesota. Or as Renee Paquette called it on a pre-show clip with RJ City, Minneapolis, and then RJ called her out right away and said, no, there's Twin Cities and we're in the other one. They got it right throughout the show the rest of the night. And so I don't know if that's a sign of momentum or not. I mean, but I think Moxley and Swerve give AEW a cool factor going into Dynasty that I don't think should be discounted. I think most people would look at that and go, if they can get Moxley featured in a better way again, and they can put Swerve on top of this roster, AEW has an identity that I think works for a lot of people who were souring a little bit on it, and maybe big walk-ups for attendance recently. Well, when I say big walk-ups, I mean it's still under 4,000 people. I mean that was red alert 6 months ago,
sure.
But the momentum, I believe that they went 7 straight weeks being under 3,000 fans, and now they have 3 times in 5 weeks being over 3,000. And this crowd came in around 3,500 with a late walk-up. So, I mean, these are little measurements compared to WWE these days with their big measurements, selling out stadiums. And, well, I mean, they're not even selling out the European tour on some of these dates, but still drawing big crowds. But nevertheless, you want to see progress. And if you're AEW, I think they should look at this and go, you know what? I think maybe we got things back on track a little bit in terms of who we're featuring and how we're featuring them. And again, Mox, Swerve, I put up there and go, yeah, this is who we are in 2025.
Yeah, I would. I mean, you got to start somewhere. The crowds are building a little bit at a time, and that is definitely a sign of momentum. They're showcasing what you characterize as cool guys, which is Moxley and Swerve. The fans have been clamoring for Swerve to give him more time, and finally we're getting there where he's a weekly presence. Yep. And I'm so glad to see that. He's definitely a character that has that factor, and that's a guy you want to showcase and get out there. I know he's been doing a little media this week as well, so that's timed very well. They're starting to do those little things very well. The part about Omega that you mentioned, I thought this is the best he's been since he's come back. Yeah, I mean, he has that quirky charm, but that's him being himself. Yes. And he hits some really, hit some really funny lines. It reminded me of when AEW first started, and he had that quirky charm that people really got behind. Great in the ring, and then he has some people don't like it, but a lot of people really were behind him, and they kind of got back to that. And I really enjoyed him playing off of Bailey, and I'm sure we'll talk about that Ricochet segment playing off of that as well. Yeah. So I think they're starting to showcase people play to their strengths. The Jarrett thing wasn't working, so they phased that out. You haven't heard from him in weeks. They realized that, and they've course corrected and featuring the people want to see. Tony Storm being in the main event. I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. Yes. So yeah, little signs of momentum that they're finally picking up, and it's starting to show in attendance and ratings of things that matter. So I've really enjoyed the show the last few weeks. I'm not sure what the exact turning point was, but I think they're on a good course. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting to say you don't know what the turning point was. I think they just, we've talked about like death by 1,000 cuts before with Vince McMahon a lot of times and little things, and even AEW. There were when things took a turn for the worse, it was like different people had different reasons why they thought it had taken a turn for the worse. I also think people would have different reasons why they think AEW is better than it had been just a few months back. And I mean, I think they're just utilizing the talent that they're focusing on talent that deserves TV time, and they're utilizing them well. And I think they're simplifying a little bit. So yeah, there's a lot to get into on the show, and I think mostly positive things to highlight and encourage them to emphasize. And that kind of goes to what I was saying about Moxley. Like Moxley, and we'll throw some chat comments up on the screen and react to them after our introductions in a second here. But Moxley hadn't been super cool lately, and I thought Swerve made him the most cool he's been in a while tonight. Moxley playing off a Swerve worked in a way that a lot of what Moxley has been doing just felt a little bit off. So we'll talk about that when we get into the chat room comments. Let's take this chance to pause and introduce ourselves quickly, and then move to those chat comments and discuss more about tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite, emanating from St. Paul, Minnesota at Roy Wilkins Auditorium. I saw a really bad WCW house show there in the early 90s with a very, very young Dustin Rhodes. I also saw David Bowie in concert there. A lot of good concert memories. in that venue too. I am to answer a question in the chat. Kyle Fassel says, Wade, did you move into a cabin in the woods? The non-studio setting is jarring. I am in the cab. I am in our cabin in the woods, near Canada. It was planned, and I wasn't able to be at Dynamite tonight in person. I am quite a ways away from it, but having a blast. There's a lot of snow up here, and enjoying the heck out of a last stint of winter here. So it's just gorgeous. I mean, there's snow, the sun was out, and it was in the 40s, and it was short sleeve weather because the sun was so warm. It was fun being outside. Very Minnesota thing to say, by the way. All right. So this is a Wade Keller Pro Wrestling post show for Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. And I'm Wade Keller, host of the show. I'm the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter and the website PWTorch.com. And also the host of various podcasts, including the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling post shows that you're watching right now, the Wade Keller podcast, which featured Rich Fan on the flagship yesterday. So hope you'll all check that out. And also various VIP exclusive shows, such as The Fix with Todd Martin that I host every week for VIP members. Todd and I recorded earlier today. Normally we record on Thursdays. Todd's on vacation in Europe, and he's been keeping up on wrestling. The technology's great. We've been keeping up on The Fix, but it's been recorded on different days. That'll be going up either late tonight or tomorrow when we get to that. When we get to post-producing it and posting it. So a lot of reasons to go VIP, including getting ad-free versions of our free shows in the podcast format, 35-plus years of archives, hundreds of retro radio shows from the 90s, almost thousands of back issues of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter, chronicling pro wrestling since the late 1980s, and much more. So if you are interested in some of those things that I mentioned, or simply more information, go to pwtorch.com/govip. That is pwtorch.com/govip to become to get information on becoming a VIP member and decide if it looks like it's the right thing for you. I'll leave that on the screen for just a couple seconds here for our YouTube audience. If you want to subscribe, there's a look at the logo of some of the content that we're able to put out for our VIP members. And then also, if you want to participate in tonight's show, the way to do that is in the chat. If you're watching us live, we have a live chat on our YouTube stream. You can find a link to our YouTube stream at pwtorch.com on our website, where I do live TV reports covering Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The link to the live YouTube show is in there, but you can also just go to YouTube and search PWTorch and click on the live stream there. And join us. We've got a lot of comments in the chat, and we'll be getting to those momentarily, as mentioned. Another way to participate is by emailing us at wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. And if you're a VIP member or Patreon supporter, you can find a link to join us as a live video or audio-only caller. So that is another way to participate in the show. The other voice and face you hear and see on the show is Darrin Lilly. He is a PWTorch contributor. His main beat is covering TNA Impact Wrestling, but he also joins me for post shows, most recently here on the Dynamite post show. Darrin, great to see you. Great to have you on the show. How are things going?
Thanks for having me. Doing well.
Yes. Good to have a fun show to talk about. I'm sure there'll be some critiques thrown in as we go, but I don't know that there's any huge gripes that I have, but we'll see what the chat has to say about our smiles and our optimism and our positive framing of things as we go. So let's, by the way, just some chat room comments. Excellent segment with Mox and Swerve, says Adam Kidd. But he adds, the rest of the show is just meh. We'll get into that. We'll see. Sometimes it's hard to assess the full show when you're just watching it, you're preparing to analyze it. So the more we talk about it, we'll see if that comment rings true or not. The good fellow 1422, as I referenced earlier, Darrin said, "Is Mox cool?" I don't know. Swerve has all the swag. I think Moxley's cool, but there's been glitches and setbacks in some of what he's doing. But I mean, come on, Marina Shafir and Mox, the chemistry they have, and now we get to see him take up next week against Swerve and Willow. I think that's a lot of fun and a good use of them. Marina Shafir, by the way, Darrin, has been this quiet assassin off to the side, just doing her thing, and she's played her role so believably, and they haven't done a lot with her, but I think there's going to be some anticipation to see her teaming with Mox next week.
Yeah, she has not had any. I don't think she's been in the ring since she's had this run with the Death Rider. So I think that will be heavily anticipated. And I really like the exchange, the fight that she had with Willow at ringside. It was a good pull apart.
Yeah.
And really looking forward to this match and seeing her being utilized in the ring. And I'd like to see where that goes with her because she's a very intriguing character. And that's somebody they didn't get a lot of before. And she's being utilized very well.
Yeah.
See how the in ring goes, though. I'm curious.
Well, that's always a thing with her. I mean, but Willow. I think Willow and her can have in a mixed tag match is a good way to utilize Shafir. I hope they protect Shafir's her credibility, her
Yes.
aura that she's developed in recent months.
That's going to be very important. And Moxley has obviously seen something in her, so we'll see if he's proven right over the next week or so when she hits in the ring. And I'm encouraged from what we've seen.
Yeah. Dougie Doug says, great show. AEW has done a lot of small things better since Tony said he was going to be more hands-on. And ratings, attendance, and momentum seem to have finally turned a corner. Darrin, let me ask you, what you said it's hard to put a finger on, but just what comes to mind? I think that they focused on the right people, and they've taken the attention away from some people who I think were counterproductive to the cool factor, and they know who they're in the business of promoting right now, and they're leaning on them. They've eliminated some of the uncool stuff. I don't want to overuse that phrase, but I think it became a concern earlier this year. And there's, it still makes no sense to me why a heel gets to attack babyface before the bell, and the ref goes, "Well, I have no choice but to give the heel the advantage and ring and call for the bell." There, I don't know how Powerhouse Hobbs knew to be waiting where he was for an unplanned post-match attack by Mark Davis, and there's things that happen where they just don't pass the logic test, and it's pretty easy to fix them. Those are small things, and I think the more important things are better. So what has jumped out to you, big or small, that you think has added to? I think your attitude is reflected in Dougie Doug's comments.
Kind of like you often say, the absence of irritants and getting rid of those things that people were criticizing, and rightfully so, relying on some of the kind of the older performers. They still have a lot of that, but they're not so reliant on that. So getting rid of some of those things like the Christopher Daniels thing, Jeff Jarrett, and focusing on the people who are over. You got to lean into, even though they're getting up there, the Hurt Business, people love them, and you got to showcase them. You got to get them out there, and they had a pretty big segment, and I enjoyed that. So focusing on those people, and to the point of the comment that you just had up when Tony leaned into saying that he's putting his full focus or whatever, maybe it was just the NFL season ending, and maybe that was the turning point that he was able to concentrate. He has so much on his plate, and I would love to see him delegate more, maybe bring in Gail Kim to help with the women's division part of it and continue to focus that. I'm happy with the multiple storylines that they have going on there, but you can always do better. That's somebody that I think could help in the big picture stuff. Something they might want to think about.
Normally I would say I think that women shouldn't be brought in just to make the women's division better. I think women writers should be brought in to make the whole company better, men and women. However, and that is normally I think let men, if men should be able to write for women, women should be able to write for men. The problem is in this business, a lot of the people who have writing jobs have not shown themselves to be really good at writing for women. And so they're really, this is a case where I think there's something to be said for more female perspectives on how to portray the women, because there's such baggage when it comes to how Vince McMahon and Kevin Dunn and Vince Russo and these names over the years have featured, and really it predates them. That's going way far back to say it predates Kevin Dunn and Vince, but it was the worst under Vince and Kevin Dunn and Vince Russo. I think there was some pretty shameful things done over the years with them. The whole era of TNA where everyone was all the women are called each other skanks and get off the stripper. You came fresh off the stripper pole and all this stuff every week. And it was just I always said TNA during that era felt like there was some sad, pathetic male at a strip club at 4 p.m. in a dark corner writing his TV show, hating women, and bringing the script to TV and asking women who were paid to execute it. It was just awful stuff. So, hey, if a man can write better for women, and then all the better. But there's something about living life as a woman that is going to probably set off some alarm bells when certain things are proposed by the men running this business for the most part. And so, yeah, I'm for that. And, it's the women's divisions are not always smooth in how people are portrayed. But we'll get into Toni Storm because she's just delightful. I'm loving her gimmick and the fact that she's in the main event and getting a push. I want to try to stay focused, not bounce all over the place, because we will get to each of these segments as we go. But anything else you want to, because I jumped in about the Gail Kim thing, but anything else jump out to you about what you like about AEW?
Just really focusing and leaning into, if somebody's getting over, they lean into that. Kyle Fletcher was somebody who has momentum. They're going with him. Good. Get him more screen time. Leaning into that. Toni Storm, of course, people reacting to her huge. And you got to continue to focus on her. And they could do the same with Mariah May whenever they had the storyline. I'm sure she's coming back out of the pay-per-view, I would imagine. Powerhouse Hobbs, he's somebody that you can build towards the future. And they're really... Whereas you would see like sporadic appearances before, he's been on there every week pretty much to give him some momentum to get those reps in. And that's so important, where the momentum would be broken up before and that would you'd stall the pushes, but now it's pretty consistent. So I like that as well.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit more about the Kenny Omega Speedball segment and then the Ricochet. By the way, small thing with AEW, but it's actually not super small. Can we just fix our audio? Like that Ricochet segment was all raspy or, all distorted. It's just a thing with AEW. I mean, I just thought with the resources that Tony Khan has and TBS and TNT, we wouldn't have bad acoustic stairwell promos. We wouldn't have audio not sounding good. That was worth redoing and figuring it out. That said, we had Kenny Omega in the ring. He won a match against an ROH wrestler who had a 7-match winning streak that most AEW Dynamite viewers may have never heard of. But they did a little video package and said, hey, he's on a hot run. He's got a chance of a lifetime. I enjoyed Taz saying if he wins, he should just retire. If he beats Kenny Omega, if Blake Christian beats Kenny Omega, that should be, it doesn't get any better than that. I actually thought that was a compliment to Kenny for Taz to say, if he wins 8 in a row and the 8th win is against Kenny, just retire. It's all downhill from there. But Kenny beat him. And pretty quickly, but there were some flashy moves. But then afterwards, that's the promo we referenced, Darren, where Omega goes, hey, what's going on? It was almost Orange Cassidy-like, just, casual, chill way. It's too bad I don't get a chance to wrestle every week like I'd like to. Doesn't explain why. I think the implication is medically, but, I mean, he could fly in and appear in person more often. No one's stopping him from doing that. Maybe the doctor says you can't sit on flights, but I doubt it. And then he said, it's great when I have a chance to come to St. Paul's. No, it's St. Paul. I don't know what that was. And then he said, I promised them I'd make it quick. And I don't even know what that, I guess he just said he'd beat Blake Christensen quick. I don't know if that's a plus or a minus for fans who want to see him do a lot of moves. And then he said, Tony Khan has no choice but to sign it on the dotted line. I didn't even know what he was talking about there. Nothing he was saying made sense to me. I'm maybe being a little over picky about syntax. I mean, I kind of knew what he meant, but his words weren't particularly precise. And then he goes that things will be different at Dynamite because he has to face Ricochet and a newcomer, new to you, not so new to me. Now, the AW audience probably knows at a pretty high percentage who Speedball Mike Bailey is compared to a lot of other audiences. But I think it's good to not act like everybody should know who he is. So I did like that. And then Bailey walked out. I liked his touch of wiping his sneakers before entering the ring. And then he had that weird pose where he has one foot flat, the other lifted, and he's kind of rotating. I don't know. It's like, Bailey is just like, Speedball's just like this sort of charming and sort of a disarming, nerdy way about him. And I don't think people know exactly how to take him. And in this setting, he's opposite of Kenny, and they have this weird exchange that it felt like it was like out of, I'm trying to think, like Big Mouth, like where two adolescents who have a crush on each other trying to say hi to each other and express that they have crushes on each other. And I don't mean that was the vibe with Ken, but like there's this awkward adolescent aspect to them. Hi, I'm Mike. I'm Speedball. Who are you? Oh, I'm Ken. It was just, and the crowd was getting a kick out of it. Like there was just this nerdy, awkward exchange, and the crowd was kind of laughing, not at them, but sort of with them. But Omega's reactions to Speedball saying nice things to him was weird. Speedball's like, I respect you, not just as a wrestler, but as a person. And Omega's like, huh? And I'm like, what? He just said a nice thing about you. He's not up to anything. It's Speedball. So the whole thing was so quirky and awkward, and I kind of loved every second of it. But I think it sort of worked, and I actually think it was quirky in ways they weren't intending, but I still think it worked out okay. Except for the fact at the end that Bayley said, when I get a chance, I'll kick your head off. And fans, and Bayley cupped his ear as the fans were booing. And I'm like, wait, the goal here is not to turn fans against Bayley. It's just to make people want to see Bayley and Omega. So I'm still against adding Bayley to this match. I think Omega versus Ricochet is a better match for pay-per-view. Yeah. They should have kept Bayley out of a match of this caliber for a while longer. Because I think you want to build anticipation for that. Let him get some wins. I mean months down the line. Like it should be a big deal when if they saw in Bayley Speedball how he fits into AEW in kind of a fun, corny way. Ricochet called him cornball instead of speedball. If he fits in kind of a corny way that makes him stand out, kind of like Orange Cassidy early on, build up to it slowly, because now you're making fans choose, and now Ricochet, who's a newly turned heel, is against two baby faces. So either you have to kind of turn Bayley semi-heel, which I don't think they intended to do, but it sort of happened, or it looks like Kenny has an advantage against a heel. I don't like this three-way just because Bayley got a good pop and made a good impression. I would have waited on it. I feel stronger about that now than I did last week. That said, I like the charm of Bayley and Omega interacting. So those are my thoughts on that segment, a little extended. What do you think, Darrin?
Well, referencing the interview portion of the segment with Mike Bailey, that's pretty much the Bayley that we saw the last couple of years during the TNA run, where I could not really just grasp, like, is this guy putting on an act?
I know.
Or is this really him? Is he being genuine, or is he just trying to put one over on us? And I could never quite figure him out. And that is the same Mike Bailey that we're seeing here. So it's going to, I don't think he's going to change. The interviews were never his strong suit, and he just kind of pushed through. And that's a lot of what we got here tonight. But I guess there's a charm to them. He's probably going to struggle there, but it was fine for what it was. It was awkward, and
yes,
that's just going to be him going forward. But as I said earlier, I thought Omega did very well. Sure, he was unfocused and whatever, but he got in his trademark charm and wit, and that was fine. And Ricochet, people just can't stand him on sight, and I think he continues to improve every week and doing the laugh. And I thought he was wearing track pants for his wedding, but I guess that was tuxedo pants, but I couldn't tell the difference. But yeah, that was kind of weird that he would cut the promo there. But he's continuing his momentum. That's another guy that they're focusing on and get just a total 180 from what he was in WWE, and they're getting a lot out of him, and they're riding that momentum of keeping him on TV even when he's getting married. So another good job of keeping a momentum for a character.
I think on the Bayley front, to me, if you don't overpush him, and I think they're in a way overpushing him by putting him in against Ricochet and Omega for a title this soon, I think people would embrace him. And I think his role is to be a top of the second tier guy who's in a position to be a little bit of a gatekeeper, a guy you look forward to because it's a break in tone. You know, the show, there's a break in tone, but he's good in the ring. You know, he's like a good athlete and wrestles in a less conventional, flashy kind of Lyoto Machida karate way. And he doesn't take himself seriously, but he's not. There's a blandness and a sameness to quite a bit of indie talent, frankly, that has really good matches and they stick around for a long time because of that. But there's sort of the, Eddie Edwards, Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, even Adam Cole sadly has kind of entered that camp. There's that group that got Mike Bennett, Trent. There's just like some people could watch AEW for a few weeks and be like, I can't tell any of them apart, and none of them stand out as having a distinct personality. Mike Bailey jumps off the screen and he has a distinct personality. And so from your time watching him, what would you have said before he debuted in AEW in terms of whether he had fit in and where he had fit in? And where do you see him in 6 months if they use him well based on weighing his strengths, but also being that he's not a serious, like I would say, Kenny doesn't come across as a serious person and that hurts him. But obviously there's a gravitas to him because of his background headlining New Japan shows. And where does Mike Bailey fall in kind of this mosaic spectrum that is wrestlers' merits to get pushed?
Based on what I had seen, I thought he would come in maybe at the Black Taurus level, a guy they would put in to have good matches with people. And since his strength is not being on the mic, not necessarily focused on a certain storyline, but just a guy to have good matches. And you could put on varying positions on the card, sometimes opening up the show, sometimes if you want to have a stellar main event, putting them up in there. But it looks like I agree with your points. I wouldn't necessarily put him that high up that fast, but maybe they're deciding, hey, we want to see if people sink or swim or not. So let's give him a chance and see where it goes. And this match certainly gives that an opportunity if he does not rise to the occasion. There's nothing wrong with being a guy that puts on good matches. I'm not saying that in a negative way necessarily, but if he's showing some personality and it can hang with these guys, you could build towards another main eventer. As far as what happens in 6 months, obviously the jury's still out. Just because he can't really carry his end of the promos, or at least that I have seen anyway from the Impact days.
He created his end of a very corny promo tonight, but I found it charming.
That's true.
Yeah.
So he could still surprise me. I haven't seen his independent work, so there's still room. But
I'll take Cornball Speed Bailey, as Ricochet put it, over some guy yelling at me and thinking it's cool to say I'm going to kill you. Although he did say I want to take your head off. I mean, it was a little severe. It was like, whoa, sure. Mike Bailey said. But I mean, honestly, like it's refreshing that I'd have a guy just yelling at you and thinking yelling means you're a good promo. Right. And bulging your eyes, I'm going to get you. It's like, no, he's distinctly Speedball Mike Bailey. I mean, it's just like you know the type of fan is going to want to buy his T-shirt, and so AEW should capitalize on that. What I'm worried about, Darrin. And we'll find out in a couple of weeks, or a week and a half, is did they add him to the match so we could do the job so they could protect both Ricochet and Omega at this point? And if that's the reason, boo. No, that's not a reason to add someone to a match. That is, I say Paul Levesque needs to do more brave booking and fewer cop-out finishes. That's the most cowardly booking there is. Take a guy who's got some charm, makes a kind of a fun impact right away. He's a veteran. There's some, people going, ooh, is he going to fit in AEW? And he kind of gets over because he's so different than the, Trent, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong mix of kind of indie guys who have good matches. So let's throw him in, and so we can do a job. So we don't have to choose between Ricochet and Omega. I'm against that. I was, again, very much in favor of Omega Ricochet one-on-one.
Yeah, I would have preferred they go that route, but
yeah,
I hope they didn't do that. I hadn't really considered that, but yeah, I guess we'll see.
Well, we got a mega super chat from Efren who goes, "Yay, PWTorch!" Thank you, Efren. Appreciate it. Does anyone want to top that? A 1999 super chat.
That was very kind.
That was very kind. You can be on the good list tonight. Let's turn this into a bidding war. Let's see if we can get to like $10,000 by the end of the night. Good All luck. Right. Yeah, I know. No, seriously, thank you, Efren. Appreciate it. I don't know how to respond otherwise. I mean, we comment on super chats, and it's not adding to the speedball conversation, but you can't see that and not draw attention to it. Okay, so Kyle Fassel says, I'm surprised they had speedball talk. I've been following him for a while. I always thought that's been his downside. I'm surprised they had speedball talk. I'm surprised they had him talk with Kenny Omega live on television.
It's a risk.
And yes, it was a risk, and it was. I mean, I was smiling. The crowd was kind of laughing. So I don't know if they intended it to be as kind of awkward and quirky as it was, but like I said, ultimately I think it kind of worked. Yeah. Derek Mitchell said, Speedball Mike is walking off the set of Cobra Kai. Dougie Doug said, Speedball has the aura of a guy who wanders around your local mall trying to get teenagers to sign up for karate classes. Totally. I took karate for so many years. He is so, maybe that's part of why I'm enjoying the charm, is he just reminds me of so many people, who, yes, they're signing people up for karate class, and the parents walk in to their kids and like, hey, we're going to teach them discipline and blah, 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 endurance, self-defense. He totally has that aura.
Pretty accurate.
Yes. Speedball Mike as Derek Mitchell says, Speedball Mike Bailey is walking off the set of Cobra Kai. Did you post that twice? Why am I reading it twice? I should be rewarding double posts. Kyle Fassel said Mike Bailey walked off the set of the karate scene in Napoleon Dynamite. That's there's something to that too. And Darrell, let's see. I don't know what Wade sees in Speedball tonight, because he had a negative cool factor and was thrown off, and then what he was wearing made him feel like a nice bum. So Darrell just throwing water on our optimism here. Well, yes, I mean he had a negative cool factor, but I mean nerd culture is in. I don't. He doesn't really fit
Sometimes it
nerd culture.
works.
Yeah, it's just he seemed like a nice guy who's just likes to wrestle and isn't trying overly hard to be cool. Darrell adds, Bailey can be awkward, but he can't be awkward and dress bad while looking super small. The clothes made him look like 105 pounds soaking wet. And then talking corny. No. You can't show too many flaws. I don't know. I thought he dressed like I would expect Speedball to dress. But did that jump out to you, Darren?
It didn't jump out to me at all. I got to go back and look now, but that's right. Exactly what I would have expected. I will say this for him. Yes, he was like corny and awkward or whatever, but he did come off as genuine. Like it's just a nice guy, and he's not trying to put on some character or something like that. And sometimes if people sense that genuineness, that authenticity, that can connect you with the fans, and that can go a long way also. So it wasn't necessarily all bad. And I get whoever was, it made some very valid points, but that could also work in his favor. So
yeah. So Kyle Fessel wants to know, wait, do you think there's a comedy type aspect they can put into his character? The thing is I don't want them to write comedy for him. I just want him to be him. Like this idea, we need a writer to make Speedball more or less something. Just let Speedball be Speedball and see what happens. It's low risk. I mean, he's not like this hot free agent signing. It's not like they're ruining Adam Cole or MJF, who are MJF a hot rising main event star, Adam Cole a top NXT guy. Like it's Speedball. Like it's all upside. Just don't overthink it. Ricky Knows says Speedball looked pretty silly in there. He went ahead and cut a serious promo that felt forced, while the other two were unserious to a hilarious degree that I liked. So I don't know, variety of opinions here. It's fine. This Ricky Knows also posted. Kenny mentioned that he has a cat on TV. I guess we know what Swerve is going to do if he ever feuds with Kenny Omega. Ooh. Yeah. So anyway, anything else on Speedball, Darren?
No, but yeah, I wouldn't discount him. I mean, he's a guy that has upside, so he could come out surprising us. I mean, you never know who will catch fire, and he could be one of those guys.
Yeah,
he's got enough in the ring. I think back to his match against Ospreay and TNA, and I mean, a guy with all that talent, you just never know what will happen.
Yeah. So I do want to say, Goodfellas said we found Wade's guy, Speedball. I want to be clear. I'm against him being this high on the card. Like I am not for him. He's being pushed too hard too quickly. I find the idea that he's not a good promo and he's not this and he's not that. That's what makes him valuable, because he isn't another guy just who is the same and semi-interchangeable. He's distinct. I think you can have some fun with him, but don't write comedy for him. Just let him just kind of deadpan him. Just let him be him. Kind of like we say, Kenny's a main event goof who's not super serious. Just don't amplify it in a way that seems corny. Like I thought they did that with Adam Pearce on Monday on Raw. Like Adam Pearce is a good character, and then they just turned it up to 13. It's like, no, he's good when he's, stressing out and he's overwhelmed, but they just turned it into a cartoon version of him on Monday. And I'm like, no, dial it down. Same with Speedball. Don't try to amplify anything that you haven't seen yet with him. Let him just be kind of like Orange Cassidy was early on, just kind of a fun little, and again, it's not a comedy break. It's a guy who just is what he is, and you just go with it. Don't overthink it. All right. So let's see. I'm ignoring certain chats that are trying to be too funny. All right. Let's see. What's Derek Mitchell saying about Dean Malenko? I remember when Dean Malenko was in WWE and they gave him the ladies' man gimmick. That didn't work. I don't mind Speedball as a character, but it'd be great to show some fire under the nice guy persona. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't know Speedball here, but Speedball needs to be a serious wrestler in the ring. I mean, I don't want him to be. I don't know. I'm trying to think of characters where they're like, oh, there's some comedy there. So Santino Marella, I don't want him to be Santino, like a Santino Marella type slot where it's like, oh, every week we're going to do something silly and goofy. No, just let him just be him. Have him on TV every couple of weeks. Mid-card guy. There's a charm. and then get back to the serious stuff. That's what I'm an advocate for with him. But the thing is, when people are critical of him, they're like, he's not as good as Swerve Strickland. He doesn't have the credibility and cool factor of Hangman Page or Swerve Strickland. Or it's like, yes, of course not. Settle down. That's not what he's trying to be. He's not like, that's holding him to too high of a standard, and it's not fair to just let him be. Anyway, Chris Rucker has an interesting take. Can't trust Speedball. Barefoot wrestlers can't be trusted. All right.
Is that the track record, the reputation?
Yes. Michael Gross said Speedball is talented, but he's not in the XWW Guy Championship material like Ospreay, Naito, and Ricochet, who are main eventers. Yep. I agree. Okay. Let's shift gears and let's talk about the main event. And what we saw with Toni Storm tonight, teaming with Thunder Rosa. They were what was their team name supposed to be? Thunder Rosa said Thunderstorm. Oh, Thunderstorm.
Yes.
So Toni Storm.
Yes.
And Toni Storm renamed them Thunder Tits. A fan thought of it or created a sign quickly in the front row or knew it. Like, oh, yep, Thunder Tits.
Or was planted.
Big sign in the front row. I thought that Thunder Rosa and Toni Storm played off each other in a fun way. I like that they main evented with it. And then you had Toni Storm losing to Megan Bayne despite some shenanigans that could have gone the other way. Match went about 10 minutes. What did you think of the presentation of Toni Storm? Obviously, the focus here is on building up the Megan Bayne feud and trying to get Megan Bayne over in a relatively brief amount of time as the top challenger to, I would argue, their top female talent at this point.
Yeah, I thought it was a good match overall and kind of predictable but still surprising to see your champion get pinned by the relative newcomer. Megan Bayne is coming along pretty slowly. I've seen bits and pieces of her on the independent scene, and I think that she can be somebody that's really good for them. Kind of maybe a slow start, but she has good presence, and I think as she gets more comfortable, I think she'll start connecting more with the fans. They did on one of the collisions over the weekend, I think they did a video package where she did an interview, and I thought that was really good. So it'll be good to see her talk live and people become more invested. But I think they're off to a really good start. And anytime you can showcase Toni Storm, she's one of their big stars that they need to build around. And as you say, get into the Toni Storm business. And this shows that commitment, putting her in the main event, giving them plenty of time. That's more of that. Keep putting her in main events and showing that she's a big deal. And she is a big deal. And just make sure that the fans know that. Her and Thunder Rosa, I thought made a really good team. I was kind of concerned about what was going to happen to Thunder Rosa. I might be the only person thinking that. But I was glad to see her. And Penelope Ford, since coming back, it's been hit and miss, but I thought that she was really good this evening as well. And I think that she could be a good supporting character. I don't know if she's going to be like Megan's manager or whatever, but I thought she held up her end tonight.
The chat won't stop talking about Speedball while you're talking. While we're trying to talk Toni Storm here. I know, yeah. Although Ricky knows that the crowd chanting Thunder Tits did catch me off guard. Very rare crowd tonight.
You might have something there.
Yes. Chris Rucker said Thunder Rosa has fallen so far. She went from being world champ to looking out of place in a women's main event. I don't know about that. Do you agree with that framing?
No.
I mean, I see where he's coming from. I don't
yes, I understand that. I didn't think she was out of place, but that might be a little harsh, but I understand because at one point she was carrying the division. I think she can be a strong support. I think other people have surpassed her, definitely, and I think she could still be a strong piece of the division, as she proved tonight.
Yeah. Derek Mitchell said, "What's going on with AEW spray tan Megan Bayne? She looked bronzed, and MJF has the word spray tan." A good fellow 1422 said Megan Bayne, her selling was noticeable for me, not in a good way, but her offense looks great. Derek, what do you think about Megan Bayne? And how she's carrying herself so far, and is she the right person to go with to keep Toni Storm's momentum going? If you're going to push Toni Storm as a top act, and I think they are, and I think they ought to, is Megan Bayne at this stage has shown enough for you? And really what matters most is what is she showing the AW audience in her time there where they think, yeah, she's a threat. Obviously getting a pin on Toni Storm is AW signaling to the fans, we believe in her. Does it seem like again, the body of work in AEW the fans have seen, do you think it's registering with fans? Yeah, she's at Toni Storm's level.
Yes, because she beat Chris Statlander, who the fans respect, I presume anyway. And those matches were pretty good. And so getting a victory over Chris Statlander shows that you mean serious business. As I said, she's coming along. And I will say this, she kind of reminds me of when Lex Luger debuted in the NWA in 1987 or whatever. They kind of relied on like the posing and the power moves. And she even has mannerisms like him a little bit if you kind of look close. But he's a guy they kind of improved as time went on, and he wasn't smooth on interviews at the very beginning. So she's got room to improve, but I think the fans buy it, and I think those Statlander wins helped a big part in that.
Where is Toni Storm in the hierarchy right now of AEW top talent? Like in reality, and then where do you think she should be? Is she about where she should be, and where is that?
Overall, I would say she's top 4 with Ospreay, Omega, Swerve, her. I feel like I'm forgetting someone. But I'd say she's on the level of Mercedes Moné, so you could.
How about Hangman Page or Kenny Omega or Swerve Strickland or Jon Moxley?
She's above Page.
Okay.
I would say.
Yeah.
But I mean, the marketing possibilities, that's somebody once you get out there on like the different shows or guest appearances or whatever, podcasts, she did a virtual autograph signing with High Spots, and she kept the character.
How do you do a virtual autograph signing?
You can pre-order what you want them to sign, the different pictures.
Gotcha, okay.
It sounds ridiculous.
No, I'm making fun of it. I know. Yeah,
but she kept the character up for like 2 or 3 hours, and it was hilarious throughout. So that will translate, I think, to mainstream different avenues. She's somebody I don't think they've even touched the surface of where they can go. And even she got the chant over tonight. So it's crazy. There's so many possibilities. It wouldn't surprise me if how Becky Lynch caught fire that time and became like the biggest star in WWE for a little bit. I could see that happening here as well.
I'm thinking of virtual autograph session. Like what other virtual things could you have? Like virtual meals? I'm going to cook in front of you and hold the food out. You can imagine eating it, or a virtual massage. Hey, how's your shoulder feeling? It's like charge $100 an hour for that. It's like, what scam is it just sounds so ridiculous.
It's possible.
A virtual eye exam. Actually, a virtual eye exam could probably work. You could hold up like the eye chart and judge.
I mean, that could work.
Yeah. A virtual blood test. Yeah, just poke yourself. We'll look at the blood. I don't know. All right. I'm here all week, people.
There's virtual doctor's appointments.
They do, but I mean, that's different. Like you can talk to the doctor and they say, you do this to help your back feel better. I don't know. Yeah, Dougie Doug says virtual surgery. All right. Let's see. Okay, so Derek Mitchell says Toni Storm has the ability to be the main focus of the company, similar to the man Becky Lynch. I think she's top 2 or 3, and that's the thing. I do too. I like when you look at this lineup of options that they have, and it's not I wouldn't say an embarrassment of riches. They just have a good group of people who could be the next AEW champion, or at championship level. I mean, I think they're going to move on from Moxley relatively soon, but you got obviously Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, MJF. There's
Jay
good, well, the people who have been pushed at main event level, I mentioned. Then you have kind of that next level, like Jay White, Kyle Fletcher. I'm not staring at the roster right now, but there's this next layer that you could move up into that level. There's certain people are defined at a certain place. Wheeler Yuta's not going anywhere. Claudio's not going anywhere. Pac's not going anywhere. They're good, but they're kind of where they're going to be. I think there's still, quote, hope for Jay White, for instance, to get elevated. I think Adam Cole, the jury's not out anymore. He's not a top centerpiece guy. He's going to be a utility guy, which is fine. Be in the kind of the Claudio range probably going forward. And he had a bad feud with MJF, had some injuries. I thought, well, whatever. I don't want diss on Adam Cole. It's clear he's no longer. My point is he's no longer in the conversation. As somebody who you're like, oh, don't forget about him when you talk about people who might win a world title and be the centerpiece. the centerpiece act for AEW, because I think we know that that's not gonna be the case at this point. But when I say that, going back to Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné, include them in the conversation. Like I think you can get to the point where Toni Storm is somebody you're looking at and going, well, do you headline the next pay-per-view with her or Will Ospreay? And depending on how hot the feud is, I think you can go either way with that. And I think that should be the goal. And I'd like to, I mean, at the last pay-per-view, Toni Storm should have headlined. And I think there should be, if I mean, maybe Mercedes will catch on too, but I would like to see in the next 8 months, like, or for between now and a year from now, I'd like to see Toni Storm headlining a couple pay-per-views. And it's just a matter of booking hot opponents and hot feuds. It shouldn't be just because the men are cold. There's a cold title match, like kind of Copeland Mox was relative to others. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So Derek Mitchell says Toni Storm, Mercedes Moné, Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, MJF, Hangman Page, Swerve Strickland. They should be the focus. And really, you can have an ensemble and move around every 3 to 9 months. Have someone else on top of the men's division and someone else on top of the women's division. And yeah, it's a good mix of people, and I think a good support team too. Goodfellas says I think Stat should be on that list. I strongly disagree. I don't think she's shown herself to be top tier. And it's like sort of a speedball. It's like, I don't mean to like, oh, she should be cut. She's not, her personality, her ring work. It's just not top tier. She isn't defined, and her work is fine, but it's not top level. She doesn't know who she is as a character. She's been booked poorly. So part of that is factoring into my opinion of her. But I don't think she's got Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné level in her acting.
I will say, I think that's somebody that could get more out of, though.
Yeah, I think you could. I think that if you booked her better, you get more out of her. But it's not. I don't say it's unfair to her, but I just disagree that she's top tier talent. I mean, I want you to point me to something that is evidence that that's not just wishful thinking when it comes to star power, presence, knowing who she is, conveying who she is, both on the microphone. David Bryant's written about her promo work and just saying, if she's serious about being a top act, hire an acting coach, hire a speech coach. Just get better at certain things that are important in how you carry yourself and how you talk. She's just, if this is where you need to be a top person, she's hovering, somewhere under it. And maybe she can be that, but I got to show me that she's improving and is taking that seriously before we get there. Unfortunately, you could say that about some men who get top pushes, and that's the double standard. But some men get super over in Japan, where they're asked to do one thing that doesn't really translate as being a top person in the United States, but the fan base wants to see him and they're revered as royalty. And Kenny Omega is kind of an example of that. But if you can't deliver a main event promo and be a serious person week to week and be a compelling personality, it's going to limit you compared to what's asked of you in Japan, which is show up, periodically for a stretch of time and have kick-ass matches and cut sports like post-show press conference at a table. That's a whole different set of expectations and same with the Young Bucks. I mean, they were really exciting indie talent, but when it came time to being weekly characters, cutting compelling promos, I don't know if they didn't care enough or didn't feel comfortable with it or just weren't good when they tried. But yeah, anyway, David Bryan, I mentioned his name. I'm David Bryan in the chat goes, this is so true. So anyway.
Going back to the Statlander discussion.
Yeah, please.
You did ask for a couple moments, and I will say this: when she was teamed up with Stokely, I really thought that they had some chemistry that could have taken that to the next level. I really thought that they could have broke out of the pack. I don't know what happened there, and I think she's kind of lost momentum since then. But I thought she could have been a breakout character with that tandem. And then one moment where I thought that she really had it was, forgot the pay-per-view, but it was an Ospreay match that was just stellar. And I think it was like the third or fourth match on the show. And I was thinking, I feel bad for who's got to follow this. And I think it was Statlander against Willow. And they were able to follow it. And it was not a drop-off. And that's tremendous to follow Ospreay, just one of his just classics, and not have a drop-off in quality. So there's something there. But I mean, not that I totally disagree that she's top tier right now. Obviously, that is not true. But with some work, and they would have to make her a focus. And I'm not necessarily convinced that they see her as a top priority by any means. It would take a massive amount of work, but I think there's something there.
Yeah, I even when she's had her, what I'm saying sounds so mean because I like her work, but even when people have praised her best work, I've always watched her match and just thought there's like 4 or 5 things she does that just drive me nuts that should be cleaned up. Like, so I want to see refinement and improvement on the microphone, and I think there's just some bad habits in the ring but frankly, at the peak of Chris Jericho's career, I thought that way about him. Like, it always bugged me that he would just casually shove people into the ropes rather than whip them hard. I thought the lion salt looked like the most innocent, harmless finishing move ever. They're just, so I mean, in Penta, super charismatic, but I'm tired of him posturing to the camera, just like Sammy Guevara always did in wrestling. I mean, there's things that just take me out of matches. And Statlander was a little bit different. It had more to do with kind of just fundamentals of the flow of a match. But I don't know. The comment, and Kyle Fassel said that she's a better heel, and I agree with her chemistry with Stokely. That's a shame, and that is when I reference the bad booking. That's what I was thinking of. Is you had something, and then you just dropped it. And so yeah. Derek Mitchell says if we can critique Bianca Belair's acting on Monday, Chris Statlander is fair game. Yeah. I mean, if Bianca was. I'm such an advocate for Bianca Belair, and people think I'm being I'm hoping for her to fail. And it's like, no, I'm trying to stop people from ruining her. I want her to be a more serious person and get a chance to do that and not be put in positions to be a dumbed down one-dimensional character, because I think there's so much more there for her to do. And I think management, and to a degree herself, maybe, I don't know how much she laments what she's asked to do and how limited the ranges that they want her to portray herself, and how similar her act is as babyface to what she did as a heel in NXT. I think she can be a transformative megastar, and the clock is ticking on that, because she hasn't been that for a while now when people were expecting it to happen. And I think it's like I say about AEW. People are like, oh, stop criticizing AEW. Well, if you want them to grow and get better, and you want the drop in ticket sales to reverse, apologizing for them and going, oh, NXT fans are so much nicer than AEW fans, and so it's a disadvantage to AEW that their fans aren't as nice and loyal to the brand as NXT. That's not helping AEW. AEW's got to earn the loyalty of their fans with a more consistent, better product, and you're not going to get better if you don't face your weaknesses and have people speaking truth to power to help AEW get better. That's not hating on AEW. That is, it's the enablers who allow them to keep making the same mistakes because they're focused on the things that they like, but they don't want to look at what's causing stunting growth or causing a regression. Those people are the worst enemy, and that's what I say about criticism of Statlander and Bianca. Although I think Bianca has a massively higher upside than Chris Statlander, but Chris Statlander could be better off with better booking, and I think they were onto something with Stokely, and that was during a stretch of time when the booking was inconsistent. Kyle Fassel says, my negative talk of AEW is always because I want them to be better. So many of us have been here from the start of the company. We want it to succeed. I'm just looking. Okay. So, moving on, we could have led with this or made it the second topic. MJF in his response to MVP. I want to get into that here before we get too deep into the show. MJF said he thought about it, and it was ambiguous before we got it fully played out. But he goes, he decided he wants to hurt people. He wants to be in the business of hurting people. And so it seemed like he was accepting MVP's offer. I think that's probably what was happening, but you could go, his next line could have been, I want to be in the business of hurting people, but I don't want to do it in a group, or I don't want to be part of a faction, or I don't think I need you, MVP. That might have been the next words out of his mouth, but we didn't get it because Shelton and Lashley walked out. I like the follow-up. So we had them thinking ahead. We had MVP going, go take the week off. You guys deserve it after last pay-per-view, and go party. And Shelton's like, well, I'm not skipping gym time, but otherwise, yeah, we'll go have fun. And then MVP's going, I kept taking care of business. And one of them was extending an offer for MJF to join us. Lashley and Shelton made it clear they were not consulted on this, and they weren't sure they agreed. And I thought that they tied this all together nicely, both the setup a couple weeks back, and then Lashley and Shelton walking out going, I loved Lashley going, I think, shake my hand was what it looked like. But what he meant is, give me that business card. And I'm just like, okay. And then he tore it up. And then MVP's trying to play peacemaker and explain himself. I actually thought the acting here was good. The problem is then Big Bill and Brian Keith come out, and it's got a little overcomplicated because Jericho is and I'm complicated to cover this. It has to be overly complicated before I throw to you, Darrin, because you're feeling.
Here we go.
Yeah, you're feeling a certain way about Shelton and Lashley, which is, MVP's a scumbag. We don't trust him. Why would MVP want a part of our group? Things are going well. We're tag champs. What are you doing, MVP? At least talk with us first. They're a babyface team. You're kind of questioning MVP as a babyface, but they're getting cheered. And then Big Bill and Brian Keith are getting harassed by Chris Jericho and demeaned live on television. These public talks that could be private. He doesn't have to call them out every week for not living up to their expectations, his expectations. So now you're kind of sympathetic with Bill and Keith, and now they're challenging Lashley and Shelton. And I don't know who I'm supposed to cheer for. It's like WWE's tag division and the women's division with Rhea and Bianca and that mess. Not all the time does there have to be just a distinctly clear babyface heel dynamic, but it should be the vast majority of the time. And the exception should be for a purpose. And people going back to WWE, they just want to know, can we cheer MVP Lashley and Shelton without you complicating things with some nuanced thing that changes the way I look at them? Just let fans cheer them. And now you got the sympathetic Big Bill and Brian Keith, who I think people always kind of liked a little bit, coming out there challenging them. And you're like, oh God, who am I going to cheer for between these two? And it interrupts the emotions that were generated from Lashley standing up to MJF and going, you're a scumbag and I don't trust you. And I respect MVP, but I don't agree with his decision. I wasn't consulted on this. And then they just make you question whether you're going to be cheering for them or not when they wrestle. So Darrin, over to you.
Yeah, that was my problem with the segment, is that the range of emotions back and forth. You don't want to do that. Sure, you can have ambiguous characters sometimes, but you don't want to sway the emotions during the course of one segment. Fans were super into Lashley and Shelton and doing the chant and everything like that. And I think they really got something there, but you don't want to then turn them into bullies a couple of minutes later. Exactly. And that's where the issue is. And and they kept throwing around, exchanging the bitchometer. Your bitchometer was just going probably crazy because they said that about 4 or 5 times. They kind of over relied on that too much, and so it kind of unraveled there. But they really got something there with the Hurt Business. But you've got to focus that, and if people want to cheer them, then lean into that and take advantage of that. But stop watering down. Is it back and forth? I mean, just make it definite and then go in that direction.
And if Lashley and Shelton with MVP had been baby faces for the last 14 months, and then you want to interject a little ambiguity, like, oh, Big Bill and Keith are okay, fine, but like, don't do it right away. That's my thing with Speedball. Like, don't put them in the main event right away, or a main event-esque match for a major title with two. Well, Kenny's an established top guy. Ricochet, obviously, a big name, and people are intrigued with him right now. Just like take your time. Like, let Lashley and Shelton be clear-cut baby faces for months and months and months before you introduce any situation that causes you to go, well, wait. That's kind of how I feel about what they're doing with Bianca Belair. They might end up somewhere okay if she turns heel still. Sure. But to me, just a full-fledged heel turn is better than this weird, I don't really like her, she's being disrespectful to Io Sky, and then you have Rhea Ripley, who you maybe like less than Bianca, on the path to Bianca being a heel. Like, stop muddying things up. Like, just keep it simple. And with AEW, it's like, keep it simple. Find a heel tag team for Hurt Syndicate to go against. And they did that with the what's the gimmicky tag team that they just beat, the cornball. Why am I drawing up blank? Chat room. I have Thrill Seekers in my head. I have Jericho and Lance Storm in my head. I can't think of it. I can't get a new name.
Outrunners.
Outrunners. Thank you. Thrill Seekers, Outrunners, whatever. Darrin, you beat the chat. You get points. Why did they do that? Why did they we're supposed to cheer for? So keep it simpler. Yeah. Let us have consistent emotions. I don't know. It's like following a local sports team and then they just trade like 2/3 of the team, and all the rivals that you were booing against last month are now on your team and you're cheering for them. And they're like, oh, psych. And then they trade them back. It's like, no, just let us like the team colors, but also get attached to the players. So,
and I also think that the Hurt Business could benefit from doing some Goldberg-like squashes where they just run over some people for weeks in a row. And I think that would really benefit them. Doesn't always help everybody, but I think people would really lean into that and keep the chant going and play into the gimmick of hurting people. So it might be something to consider.
Yep. All right, let's go to the mailbag. There's a few other segments I want to get to if mailbag doesn't. I want to get to the FTR Copeland sit-down segment with Shivani. Want to talk about Nick Wayne and try to figure out what's going on with that group and Christian, and maybe one or two other things. But Let's go to Aaron C., who says, Wade, first let me say I'm a fan of AEW and I really like the product. I'm also a 13-year VIP member and I'm extremely happy with the coverage the Torch provides. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for 13 years of supporting what we do. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Join Aaron. It's not too late. You can start your 13-year streak now. I wanted to draw attention to an unfortunate downside of AEW running smaller buildings. I'm local to the Minneapolis area, so I was intrigued to see Dynamite run at Roy Wilkins tonight in St. Paul. Considering we're less than 1 hour into the show and I'm currently driving home, things did not go as planned. I'm a wheelchair user, and I've been going to shows for years. I diligently waited for tickets to go on sale and purchased the only ones available at $100 a piece. Note, I'm not complaining about the price. For the money, these seats were quite good. First row ringside. Great seats, right? Until you remember that Roy Wilkins is small, and when you throw the entire Dynamite productivity large video wall and pyro in there, it's unfortunately too small, meaning there literally was not enough room for the 4 wheelchair seats they had sold. I'm an older fan, so I graciously vacated my spot so the young child and his family could enjoy the show. Unfortunately, because of the size of the venue, I had to move behind 4 rows of seats they had on the floor and couldn't see a thing. After about 25 minutes, I left in disgust. Now, before you blame wheelchairs and older buildings and accessibility issues, while all true, this is truly an unintended consequence of running smaller buildings. If they're going to run smaller buildings, which I agree is a smart move for business and can look good on TV, Tony and his production staff need to do a better job. In a building that size, you don't need pyro and a large video wall at the expense of fan space. I want AW to do better as a business and better by their fans. If I hadn't moved, that family would have had to. I'm disappointed, and while I realize my perspective is niche, I feel it's important. You don't need to read this on the show, but if you can get this email to anyone in AEW so they're aware of my experience and the experience of that family this evening, I'd appreciate it greatly. I'm not angry. I just genuinely want someone to be aware. Well, I think that's worth reading on the air. And I will say this, Aaron, and Darren, you can let me know what you think. I don't think the small building should prohibit wheelchair seating. I think there should be, when you buy a ticket, an accommodation for the possibility that your wheelchair is going to take up more space than the actual seat. And that should just be built into the setup. There should be a place for someone who can. At the NXT show a few months back, I went. It was in Minneapolis at a smaller venue at the Armory that they've done a great job rehabbing to compete with Roy Wilkins for concerts. And we were 10th row or something like that, and I couldn't see most of us. I mean, half the show was fighting on the floor, and I couldn't see what was going on, and I was standing, and I'm 6'3". So yeah, if you're in a wheelchair and they move you to row 4, that's not good. There should be absolutely a way to plan for that. And I know the venue's small and they drew a good crowd, but there was room. And I just think that there should be within AEW a communication system, a fan liaison who, if there's a problem, Tony Khan should have somebody who he tells security and building management, if anybody ever has an issue, here's the person to reach out to. Here's a number to text, the phone number to call, or a person at ringside to tap on the shoulder, and let's take care of it. Because what happened to Aaron shouldn't happen. He was excited to go. He had every right to his seat. He had to voluntarily give it up, which was gracious of him. But the consequences should not have been him leaving the show. And I hope, I can forward that to AEW in some form or fashion, but there should be a way for Aaron to do so too, just through a fan services email or account. Darren, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear. And I'm sorry that Aaron's experience was ruined, and hopefully that's something that can be brought to someone's attention and be rectified.
Yeah. Goodfella says that's bullshit. Billionaires need to have all the avenues covered, period. See everything, no stone unturned. Hopefully it doesn't happen twice. I mean, this is the type of thing where you find out it happens, and hopefully Aaron can be, the AW will be back. And it would be nice to see Aaron get red carpet rolled out, especially if with the idea being he gave up his seat to a family with kids. I mean, that was super generous of him, and not everybody in that situation would have done that. As Derek Mitchell said, there should always be accessibility available for folks regardless. If you're on WebEx or Zoom meeting, you can imagine not having closed captioning. I'm sorry that happened to Aaron. So there we go. Okay. Up next, JB from Detroit says, is there any chance that Nick Wayne takes over the patriarchy from Christian Cage anytime soon? So that's our window to talk about this. Nick was getting a little snarky with Christian, and I thought, he's going to turn babyface. That sucks, because I think he's better as a heel, more compelling as a heel, and they've just scratched the surface of what he can do as a heel. And tonight he was kind of heelish, and Kip Sabian didn't show any emotion. Christian wasn't there. Mother Wayne didn't really show her hand. She's going to be loyal to Nick. even if she wasn't at one point. So what do you make of what they're doing there, and do you think what you make of it is a good thing?
Yeah, something definitely intriguing. Nick Wayne, super talented, but that's one of the guys they got to get going. If you want to get on the youth movement, that's somebody that could draw in a younger fan base, which they really need to do and lay that foundation. And he's somebody that can carry his end in the ring. Because I mean, he's just a super talented guy. They need to get him out there, Billy Stark, some of these younger faces, and I think that's a direction they need to be. She was spotlighted last week, and it's looked like they're finally getting Nick Wayne more involved in the storyline. And yeah, maybe he might be the one to take over. I hadn't even, there's several different ways you could go with that. But at some point, I imagine Christian and Edge are going to be back together. I'm sorry, Cope. They're going to be back together, and that'll be an effective way of doing it. But he's a guy you've got to get up and going, and we're finally headed that way. It seems, at least.
There's a happy middle ground between Edge and the other 4-letter word you said, which is just Adam Copeland. Just call him Adam Copeland. It's rare I refuse to participate in what a wrestler has decided to call themselves, but I've refused to.
So stubborn.
Yeah, it is very, very, very small of me. Number 2, I like how they reference the Twin Cities are where Hangman won his first and only title to this point 4 years ago. Acknowledging history shows respect to the fans and encourages them to participate and pay attention. If they believe that, they'll be rewarded for it. Very, very true statement. Yeah. It's those little things add up. I like WWE doing the thing where they're like, we have been to this city this many times, this many Raws or this many SmackDowns. It makes every city feel like we know, we keep track. We know how often we've been there, and it's a nice little touch. Those things can add up. Yeah. Okay. So here's another topic I said I wanted to get to, and I thought email would get us there. JB says, I'm confused yet intrigued by the direction of this rated FTR dynamic. Is this more likely a way to turn Copeland or FTR heel? I was convinced that Jay White was about to turn heel on Copeland before this recent development. I'd really prefer that Copeland was separated from the Death Riders rather than going after the trios titles. So tonight, FTR, Dax had been prickly, I'll say, and walked out, and people were wondering what's going on in his head, and he's like, we've been focused on helping Copeland, and it got to me because we should be focused on the tag titles. And then Copeland's like, wait, I didn't ask you to do that. I joined you to help you fight off the Death Riders. And he made his case, didn't escalate the heat, but he wasn't a pushover either. He goes, let's get the story straight. And then Cash was sort of literally sitting in the middle trying to make amends with everybody. And in the end, they agreed to go after the trios titles. My hunch is there would be dissension in this trios titles match, Darren, and that's where we're heading. And I think we're heading towards FTR splitting off his heels and Copeland not being with him. What do you think's happening here, and what do you think of it?
Yeah, that would seem to be the logical conclusion, which is not bad. Copeland can pick a partner. Maybe that'll eventually Christian will split off, and that's where they wind up teaming, which I think would be an excellent feud. But yeah, FTR's kind of been on the back burner. The stuff that they were saying in the interview certainly made sense within the course of the storyline. So, and that always helps matters. But yeah, they did a video package a few weeks ago of FTR talking about how they were like the dominant tag team, and it was really well done and everything. So I thought that they were going to focus on them getting back into the tag team title division, but I don't expect them to win the six-man belts, but the trios belts, whatever they call them. And then they can split off into the tag team direction again. But I like that they're involved at least in a storyline that centers around them, and that they're not the bit player supporting somebody else. So this is a positive movement.
If Nick Wayne takes over the patriarchy to an extent, and then Kip Sabian is his partner, or do they add others to the group? And then does it split off with Christian as a babyface teaming with Copeland again, and their opponents are Nick Wayne and Kip Sabian? Is that enough? Does that work? I don't know. Charles Yane in the chat says, we need closure. Rated FTR must win. I don't know. But I mean, if Nick, I don't know if Nick Wayne kicks Christian out of his own group, and that's a way for Christian to turn babyface. I don't want that either. I like Christian. Stop rushing it. Like Christian and Nick Wayne, there's still more they can do. I think they should stay together, unless Christian's deal's coming up or he wants to retire soon and he has something in mind on a limited timetable. Keep the patriarchy together and have him feud with different people as heels.
Yeah, I didn't think they've gone as far as they could with it, but if it means Wayne getting his own faction, that's not necessarily bad. Sure, they could have gone further with the whole patriarchy thing, but I'd rather see of the two ideas. I'd rather see Nick Wayne get his own faction and start to build something because he's got so much upside and is so young. So I would go in that direction actually.
David Bryan in the chat says it depends on how much you want to build up Nick Wayne and Kip Sabian first. I just think they'd just be seen as bump machines for Edge and Christian, so to speak.
Maybe.
And so yeah, we'll see. Kyle Fassel says Christian's kind of inconsistent as far as appearances go. I'd love to see more of him, especially him wrestling. Yeah, I mean, he's 50-ish years old, but when I say who are you in the business of, you can't have more like in the NBA, you got to have 5 starters. You can only have one top line in the NHL. You can only have one starting offensive line and quarterback in the NFL, all that. But Christian is somebody who would be like a bench player who'd get a lot of minutes for me. Like, I don't think he'd be your top guy, but I try to make sure that when people tune into AEW, there's a better than 50-50 shot they're going to see him doing something that he's very good at, which is his mic work and teaming with a younger guy in a tag match, doing what he does really well. I think he's modernized himself and adjusted with the times in a way where I think he's still very relevant and very entertaining. Derek Mitchell said, we don't need to see a rehash of Christian being kicked out like the Judgment Day kicking out Edge from the group he created. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Okay, so here's another angle on this, playing off of JB's original question. Derek says, could Cash be the one who turns heel on Copeland? Instead, the obvious choice is Dax, and they become full-fledged heels. I mean, I think there's a chance FTR become full-fledged heels, because I think Cash comes across as less of a alpha in that group. And so I think you could see him wanting everyone to get along, but eventually following Dax's lead if Dax thinks that, there's a reason to resent Copeland. And there'll be a misunderstanding. That's not Copeland's fault, but Cash, I think, would follow Dax before he would follow Copeland.
Yeah, that would make sense. And the feud itself would make sense because, I mean, they are friends legitimately, and they probably do want to work a program together. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Ricky Nose says, interesting that they've announced rated FTR versus the Death Riders for Dynasty. I thought they'd do a rubber match with Undisputed Kingdom at Dynasty. I'm all fine with Undisputed Kingdom not doing anything at a pay-per-view for another year until they rebuild themselves or break up. Let Cole be a singles wrestler. I think Undisputed Kingdom has baggage. It's just, when you hear that faction name, it just feels like some derivative of something that got all played out. I don't want to have Adam Cole say, "You ready for story time again?" He's leaning on the boom stuff, and even that's like the strength of his say. Just try to reframe him, and let's never utter the words Undisputed Kingdom when it relates to a pay-per-view match again. I thought as much as Cole's performances haven't been stellar, the faction is so sea level, and it just pulled him down. And the bad booking of MJF hurt too, but I'm fine abandoning that and not having closure on that. How about you, Darren?
Yeah, I'm not as down on them as much as you are. I think there's still something there, and they're really good. I mean, you shouldn't be building around them right now at this point, obviously, but I still think that there's something left there. They always put in consistent performances. Even a few weeks ago on Collision, that opening match they had was just really good. So, I mean, for good in-ring action, and that is an important foundation of AEW. I think they still have it there, but I mean, not necessarily someone to build around or maybe even be in title contention, but they can be rebuilt still, I think, and be very valuable. Just not
I think Matt Taven, when he was getting pushed in ROH, and people were like, I don't know about this. It's like there's just a vibe that they have that it's not about putting in a good match. I mean, that's AEW is full of people who put in good matches, but just seem kind of Bush League or passe or played out or indie-rific or all inside joke and kind of smirking, kind of the Sean Spears resting face. I don't know. I think with the I'm fine with Matt Taven getting a push in TNA. Like, and it's not diss on TNA. It's like, well, it kind of sounds like one, but like, because it'd be because it'd be a fresh setting for him and there'd be a place for him. But I don't want him attached to one of your top somebody who was signed as a big free agent with CM Punk and Bryan Danielson around that time and tied to him. Give him a fresh start in a new environment, and because he's talented. But AEW doesn't need what he offers, and what he offers has never been established in the AEW ecosystem. Like, he's an ROH guy was around forever, and suddenly he showed up with some offshoot. It's like when you buy like the generic name of a cereal, and it's not Cheerios, it's Cheer 4 O's. I don't know. That's all I can come up with on the fly. Instead of Lucky Charms, it's Fortunate Charms. Like Undisputed Kingdom just reeks of some generic version of something that was once authentic and cool, and now we're living off our past. And Taven walks in, and it's like they never, to the AEW proper audience, never talked about who he is, what he stands. He's just a guy standing there. Like they need to stop doing that with people. And so I just think that the baggage is there. And it is that he'd need a new setting. And sometimes players get traded to a team not because they're not talented, because there's baggage and they just need a fresh start. And so let Taven go be a mid-carder in TNA, as opposed to eating up TV time when there's so many people who deserve space, like Speedball Mike Bailey, for instance. All right.
Oh my gosh.
People are enjoying. Good fella. Cheer for O's, LOL. And David Bryant goes, Fortunate Charms, yes. You know what I'm talking about, though. Like, there's the generic things, and it's like you're not fooling me, but I know what you're what you're going for. Off yellow grams. All right. Derek Mitchell says Mike Bennett and Matt Taven reminded me of Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson being uncool, living off their Bullet Club days in New Japan. Pithy, concise, and spot on, Derek. Exactly. And there is sort of a sense of with Taven and Bennett, it's kind of like Anderson and Gallows, where they had this look of like they're in the background, like, yeah, we're still getting paid to do this, and we're doing we're doing nothing. We have nothing. We'll just go in, the bell ring, we'll give you a good workman-like match, but yeah, they're still paying us, and we're just here, but we're not inspired, and we have no character development, and we're just showing up to get paid.
I will say, though, that Bennett and Taven haven't been with the Undisputed faction for several weeks, though. So at least they've separated those two.
There we go. Yeah, well, fair. No, yes, good. That is true. But the Undisputed Kingdom name itself is so damaged.
See your bigger point.
Is so damaged. But you're right. I'm in that sense, I'm aligning them for something maybe they've fixed a little bit. We do. But now the old band, you give me a whole new thing to complain about, because now that they got the old band is back together again, and it's like, just stop living in the red, the black and gold era. Like, just create your own thing, and if it's fresh to your audience, don't base it on. If it's fresh to your audience, don't base what they're doing on what was done in the past. Tell a new story, and that's pretty much everything Adam Cole has done has been like that. Like, everything that Adam Cole has done has been built on something that happened elsewhere other than the MGF debacle. And I think that's rough for him. But I've said I'm a fan of Kyle O'Reilly, and I think Roderick Strong's a really good worker. It's like, but there just comes a point where you've been defined as this bland, good worker, average sized wrestler who has bounced around without a real distinct personality, and a fresh start can be good. So everything I said about Taven applies to Kyle O'Reilly. No, actually, it not everything, in a different way, but a lot of it does. I'd love to see Kyle O'Reilly go to TNA and be a standout star, but he's just lost in the mix. Let's see. Goodfellas said Undisputed Kingdom is an ROH act, in my opinion. Well, yes and no. Everyone's doing this now. Kyle Fessa goes Honey Nut O's. Cocoa O's in the pillowcase bag. Yeah, the pillowcase bag. All right. Let's go. Let's move back to JB's email, because I know he's got more here. Swerve is getting overwhelming cheers. Mox is being overwhelmingly booed. This alignment is working perfectly in that regard. Who knew they could succeed at getting fans turned against Moxley, but they did so without... It's been a bumpy road, but I don't... And I know people are eager to see him moved out of the main event world title picture. But I would not mind... If I'm Moxley, I don't mind the reactions I'm getting now, even if the road has been bumpy. Because it does seem like, when he was with Danielson and Claudio in that group, it was like, crowd just wanted to cheer them. They didn't want to boo that group. Like, it was just, we like the Blackpool Comic Club were trying to be heels, but they weren't heel. Like, they happened to be sort of booked in a slot and carried themselves in a way that was, but they were just so good and so respected. And Mox has managed, and I think it's mostly due to Swerve being a good babyface opponent, managed to present his act now in a way like tonight that felt major league and badass, but you weren't tempted to cheer him because Swerve was one-upping him. And even Swerve addressing, people have been on my case because since October I haven't been focused on getting the belt back. And he's like, he explained why, and now I am. And Moxley just had to stand there and kind of take it. I thought it was good. And I think Moxley in recent weeks has shown, as they say, showing ass a little bit more. He's retreated and talked tough, but hid behind things. And that's a key to fans booing you. That's one of the things with Jacob Fatu that WWE has to deal with. Like if he's just badass and pushes forward, if the goal is for him to get booed, and I don't know that that's their goal anymore, you can't have him. You have to have him act tough, but back down. And Moxley started doing that in the last month or two in a way he hadn't been before that.
Yeah, especially when his partners kind of dropped by the wayside. They really played into that. And but yeah, the reaction they're getting now is, I don't think they could be any happier with the reaction that they're both getting.
All right, are we getting Swerve and Willow against Mox and Marina Shafir mixed tag before their title match at Dynasty? They basically only have 3 more shows until the pay-per-view. Well, I think they announced it for Dynamite next week, so that's I don't know if maybe he typed that up as the show's going on, and he was predicting it. Good call. All right, it's good to see Max Caster's finally getting his catchy chant going. Are we to make anything of him finally mentioning his former tag team partner in his backstage segment with the Ops tonight? I'd like to imagine that Bones will be making his return sooner rather than later, perhaps at Dynasty. Darren, do you think there's great anticipation? I mean, they had their run. I just don't know if Anthony Bones against Max Caster's is. There's a lot of times tag teams break up and people are like, oh, that'll be great, and it's sort of like no one wants to see Arn against Tully or Hawk against Animal or Jeff against Matt or Marty against Sean. Maybe that worked a little, but I just have them break up and not wrestle each other. I don't think that's a good way for Bones to return either. But on the positive side, to mitigate that, if they wrestle each other, they've been separate for a while, and Max Caster has taken on a whole new character. If Bones comes back and is more serious, and seems like he's kind of reinvented himself, it might be better than a lot of those cases, but I would be for it being sort of quick and then just moving on. I don't think we need an extended multi-month feud, especially if it involves the Guns coming back into the picture or anything.
I don't think we're going to see it. I think they're going to build it up maybe as a one show, like a Collision main event or something like that, and that'll be it. And then they'll move their separate ways. The Max Caster thing, though, is, and we even talked about this last time, it's for some reason, I think it's starting to catch on. People were doing the awkward chant.
Yes.
So that says a lot. And I kind of look forward to his appearances. At some point, he's got to start winning or doing something. I mean, you can't do this forever, but it's oddly, against all odds, I think it's doing positive for him.
If you had as high of a ceiling for Max Caster as I did at one point as a singles wrestler, you would see this as a misuse of him and defining him down. Sure. But if you didn't think that highly of his potential, maybe I overrated him. I mean, he wasn't tested at that level, and maybe he just didn't, he is more, Miz-like in terms of his ring style in a company full of people who can really go and have distinct athletic qualities, and he was maybe better as a tag wrestler. So, but I think there's maybe something they can do with him that's more serious. Maybe he's shown himself to not be a serious enough person to pull it off. Kind of like Sean Spears. The idea was, well, let's push him. And I mean, maybe in NXT they're figuring out something with him, but I don't know. I with Caster, if the journey I'm on here, my point is maybe this is a decent landing place for Max Caster after all, because he is entertaining in this role. And so he's never can be even a second tier serious wrestler after doing this. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe some end game and some portal he's going to go through where it works out. I've seen stranger things happen, sure. But this is entertaining and it is sort of comedy relief. I mean, to me, I'd rather see Max Caster in Speedball feud, for instance, than Max Caster and Anthony Bones. I want to see Anthony Bones go do something a little more serious. He can beat Max Caster and just go, dude, I'm done with you. I beat you, and I got more thing. You keep doing your thing. I'll go do my thing. You go back to your world. I'll go elsewhere, and then let Caster feud with like a Speedball type thing. I mean, Orange Cassidy or something, and like that, and that's fine. And it doesn't have to make pay-per-view. Maybe it does. Probably shouldn't. I'm okay with it, but I think Caster's been fun and trying to get that chant going. Is it a little too, in on the joke? I can listen to that criticism, but I'm, I have a less stringent standard for kind of lower mid card stuff in terms of, the presentation of it, and I think it's if AEW wants that to be an ingredient in the mix, I think Caster's pulling it off pretty well.
Yeah, I bet he's making the most of it, and I don't think everybody could pull that off. So that's showing some talent that he's got some range that he can get that over. I think that may, in a way, bode well for him.
Yeah. Derek Mitchell says, I think Max Caster is entertaining and better as a character than him being a serious wrestler in a company with a ton of great wrestlers. Yeah. I mean, there's an alternate universe where I think Max Caster retained a cool factor that he once had a little edge to him. I mean, there was an edge to his raps that he did on the way to the ring, and where I think they could have worked around the fact that he's not Will Ospreay in the ring. I think that it's not on the table anymore. I think they've gone a different direction with him, but I think there is a path he could have taken where you could imagine him in the mix. But again, it comes down to, I say the NBA analogies, but there's some people who are really good defenders or really good rebounders or really good 3-point shooters, but they aren't starters. And maybe Caster was never going to be kind of with the talent AEW has, he would be displacing someone who's just more well-rounded and can deliver the type of matches that is at the core of AEW's brand, which is, really, really good wrestling when it comes to pay-per-views, especially. Side note, I don't want to forget to mention this. I did notice this. Ricky Nose said, did you guys notice Von Wagner as a security guard today? So that is interesting that Wayne the Train Bloom, former AWA tag team champion with Mike Enos, who I believe wrestled at Roy Wilkins probably at some point. The Beverly Brothers, his son, is out there taking abuse by wrestlers. I thought we're going to escape this week without security guys getting beat up. But nope. And yeah, I don't know. It's the crowd of security. I don't know if that's leading anywhere. But I don't know. Darren, did you notice that?
I did not notice that.
Yeah. I did a double take. I'm like, he looks familiar. I'm like, oh, yeah. There's Von Wagner.
That's why.
He and Kyle O'Reilly can go have campfires somewhere. All right, up next from JB. I'm very encouraged by Will Ospreay, Hangman, and Switchblade being the first three wrestlers announced for the Owen Cup tournament. I'm more encouraged now that this Owen Cup tournament is a tournament being taken very seriously, filled with top-tier talent. I wouldn't say three names is filled with top-tier talent. I think every tournament AEW has done has had three top names. The question is, how does the rest of it look? Because if they just load it up with wrestlers who are clearly going to lose against those wrestlers, it's no more loaded than it was. It's good to have those three declare, but let's see how it gets filled out. I can't remember how many people end up in the Owen tournament.
I don't recall. Is it 16?
Maybe there's qualifying matches, and if the chat knows, let us know. But nevertheless, there's a lot more slots to fill, and if it's mid-carders who are clearly there to do a job, if Brody King's specialty, Claudio, that the people who are there to have a good match but lose. I mean, it's no different and no better. I'm not even saying it should be, but I'm saying if that's the case, it just won't be.
Maybe in that first round, but then the second round when you start weeding some of those people out, because it's not a round robin like the one in December. This one is, I think, single elimination. So yeah, when you start getting into those deep rounds, you'll have some good matches.
Yep. Derek says it's 16 competitors. So
okay.
Yeah. Going back to Von Wagner, this would be great. Von Wagner stands up for security guards everywhere, forms a faction, is a leader. And he goes, we're not going to take it anymore. Security guards, we're getting paid by the hour. We're tired of getting abused. Nobody cares about what happens to us. We're going to stand up and we're going to be a whole faction that tries to not take over wrestling, but just insist on a little respect for the wage workers out there.
Yeah, I'm against this.
Oh, man, Darren.
Spoiling everything.
I know. Well, if it happens, I want to win. I hope they win you over after a few weeks. All right. It's now been 2 weeks in a row that we've had a main event women's match on Dynamite. Should we expect to see this more regularly moving forward with recent elevations of Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné? If we somehow get Mercedes versus Toni for both women's belts at All In, is that match capable of main eventing that pay-per-view? Darren.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's intriguing. I don't see them breaking the mindset of the AEW World Title main eventing, but that's an intriguing scenario if you were to pit them against each other and have both titles at stake.
Yeah,
you could get away with it.
Yeah,
and I think it's a match people would want to see.
Now, David Bryant in the chat just says, yes, exclamation mark. I hope that's for my Von Wagner security factor. I'd say the timing lines up a little better with Mercedes and Tony Storm, unfortunately. But that's my pet idea. Well, Derek Mitchell. See, this is Darren. This is why, you can't trust the chat. Derek Mitchell goes, apologies. It was 16 the inaugural year and 8 competitors the last 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So 16 rang a bell, but it hasn't been that many since then. And that's why I was like, maybe there's qualifying matches where it's sort of in a way was 16, but the tournament itself was 8. I can't remember because there's so many tournaments and all of that. Kyle also said that match interests me, meaning Tony Storm and Mercedes. Castor has some Enzo parallels. That's interesting. Dougie Doug says that in the chat. All right.
It's not good.
No.
I don't think.
Anyway. All right. I never thought, this is JB's email still, I never thought that I'd see the day that we have a tag team called Thunder Tits, but here we are. Only Tony Storm could pull that off. I never thought that I'd see, I already read that. Is there any chance we get an MJF versus Bobby Lashley match for MJF's right to join the Hurt Syndicate at Dynasty? I'm intrigued by the multiple directions this dynamic could head in the near future. This can go a lot of directions. I mean, we talked about what they did tonight. I don't know how much we got into where the heck this is headed. Because we kind of, I don't want to say sidetrack, I think it's a relevant point that, you're like, oh yeah, Bobby Lashley and Shelton standing up to MJF. We like them. Oh, Big Bill and Brian Keith, who Chris Jericho's being mean to, and we kind of like them and we want them to stand up to, now they're facing them. Who do we cheer? We talked about that. I think it's relevant, but a bigger point is where are they going with MJF and MVP and Lashley and Shelton? And how do you think this resolves itself? I don't think we got into that too much, Darren.
Not really. Yeah, that's the intrigue of the story because I don't see it obvious. I can't really see MJF joining up with them, but a feud is a bad fit as well. So maybe they'll do something where they're just allies or something. A Lashley against MJF match is intriguing. And
And I totally could, to me, Lashley and MJF's a fresh match, and it's a match for it's a good match against stars. Kind of like a legacy star like Lashley, and then a top contemporary act in MJF, and it gives him something different, somebody kind of different to work with that didn't jump off the page as wasn't on my radar as a singles feud, but I'd be interested in what they would do, and I just don't know. I don't know if Hurt Syndicate's going to stay kind of in the tag team business, and if they're going to add or expand. I don't know. They could overthink it and make it complicated. I hopefully MJF kind of learned from the whole Adam Cole thing to just kind of keep things simple. But at least the core element is still there, which is MJF is a despicable, awful, unlikable person. He's leaning into that now.
It's consistent.
Yeah. And I'm not big on localized plugs on national or localized insults on national television, but I think a lot of people watching at home, are like, MJF, you're so, that comment about Michael Jackson and Prince, everybody knows that's meant to go after, Prince being a one of Minnesota's top celebrities of all time and just an incredible musician. And so obviously he's going for booze, and I don't know. Goodfella 1422 says MJF and Hurt Syndicate buying watches, suits. I'm here for those segments. So we'll see. I'm David Bryant says Tony versus Mercedes is the dream match. Now any other main event is going to disappoint me. It's interesting. And Goodfella 1422 goes, yeah, Tony Mercedes is a pay-per-view headliner. The question is, what would that be displacing? Is that a show that includes Omega and Okada?
That's got too much history. To it. So any other show, sure.
See, it kind of makes you wish for 2 nights of All In. You can just give them, give a deserving women's dream match one night and the men the other. But I don't think they're doing that. All right, JB says Mike Bailey gets more likable every week. I agree with last week's assessment that he's capable of being AEW's version of Sami Zayn. Yeah, I didn't bring him up this week. Someone else made that comparison, and I think there's something to that. I think there's some differences too that are relevant and
Definitely.
I think more limiting of Speedball. But I get the comparisons. You know, a guy who's maybe never going to win the world title, but you could do a story arc where people think maybe, just maybe, and people think about Jey Uso and go, anything's possible. Yeah.
A guy who's just very earnest and that you want to see succeed.
Yeah.
Getting his shot. So, man, at some point they probably will do that storyline.
JB adds a 2 babyface versus 1 heel triple threat dynamic between Kenny, Speedball, and Ricochet is an interesting choice. Yeah, I mean, interesting is an interesting way to put it. It's perplexing, maybe. Rushing something that didn't need to be rushed. And again, if it's just so Speedball can do the job, like, what you do with wrestlers should not be, we're including in this match so we can avoid a brave booking decision. Like, that's an insult to Speedball, if that's all that is. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to think if there's any other segment we haven't covered through chat and email interaction. Anything jump out to you, Darrin?
2 very good in-ring matches, Brody King against Kyle Fletcher and Mark Briscoe against Takasha. They're just really good matches that people were super into. And I mean, you could figure who was going to go over, but still, they were still competitive and good matches. Compliments to all those. Mark Briscoe is just so consistent and always putting on entertaining matches, and him and Takasha work so well together. Takasha, another guy that eventually you might be able to put in that top tier.
It's with AEW, and people are like, why aren't you talking about how good the wrestling is? It's the old journalism maxim of dog bites man does not make the news, but man bites dog does make the news. So it's like, you know,
we really should have been talking about those matches more. But
but it's a compliment to AEW.
Yes,
that is dog bites man. Like, that happens. Dogs bite people. Like, well, I don't want to be mean. Like, dogs are wonderful. But you know, a human biting a dog is a little bit more novel because our way of fighting back against a threat is not biting usually. And you know, there's a few wrestlers who are the exception to that. So the point is if something that you're used to happens, it's less newsworthy. And AEW delivers on that. It's newsworthy when they don't have that. And that actually comes up. Like, I tuned into Dynamite to see good wrestling. Where was it tonight? That's news. It is a compliment to AEW and what people expect from them, that they're like, oh yeah, we got 2 really good matches tonight, a couple others that were solid. That's baked in. Like, that's not where AEW needs to improve. So therefore it's just kind of less newsworthy. And yeah, but I mean, Brody King, I feel like they could have positioned him where it would be less obvious that he was on his way to losing to Kyle Fletcher. That should have been more of a toss-up if they had been doing a little bit more with Brody King, because there's something there with him, but I think the time to do it with him was, you know, out of the first Continental Classic, and I think now it's going to be tough to kind of reframe him as somebody who's on the rise and maybe not unstoppable, but maybe about to find a water level higher. He does sort of feel like a utility guy, you know, Claudio Pac like, Wheeler Yuta like. You know, good hand, good match. But, you know, when if you tell me Brody King is in a match that lasts 18 minutes on TV, I know he's against a name that they're willing to dedicate 18 minutes of TV time to. Therefore, I know Brody King is losing. I don't need to know who his opponent was. They're not going to give Brody King 18 minutes against somebody who he's going to beat. And that's a fact, and it's a bummer, because Brody King should be able to be somebody who would win an 18-minute match against somebody lesser than him. He should be at that stature now, but he's not. But I'm also not against Kyle Fletcher losing to Brody King right now, because Kyle hasn't been defined down recently in that way over the last year. So,
yeah, and Brody King is somebody I'm very high on. I don't think they've just taken him down where he couldn't be built up if they decide he's a guy they want to go with and they want to give some few. I just think it would take just a few wins to get him up and running if they wanted to go in that direction. But I think he's such a valuable guy, and I hope he's not like the designated guy that just takes pins and all that.
Exactly. Yeah. Derek Mitchell says, one AEW fatal flaw is they don't historically book big men very well at all. Goodfella 1422 said, Kyle Fletcher, I know you had an all-time cage match and lost pints of blood, but now that you showered, we're going to need you to have Brody King chop and beat the brakes off you for 20 minutes. LOL. And Ryan, Akamatun says, Tony Khan doesn't book big men well. adding to that. Heel Biz said, I'd be willing to help Tony. So there we go. And Goodfella says, Brody, I'm a fan. Him losing again, I don't love. Yeah. Darren, anything else in chat? This is your time to speak up or hold your peace until next time.
No, I think that we hit everything.
Yeah. Jay White's good on the microphone. He's like, we're gonna give shout outs to just little things that happened. He's good on the microphone. Let's see. Oh, people were saying earlier, Darren, just cleaning up some of the chat comments I didn't get to, that Speedball reminds him of Ricky Steamboat. There's something there if he's booked correctly.
Okay.
But then Kyle Fassel said, no, Vic Steamboat.
Oh.
Actually, someone else said that, and he was responding to them.
Oh.
Yeah, Dougie Doug said he's more Vic Steamboat in aura. Yeah, I get people who don't know Vic Steamboat, the son of Ricky, just didn't quite have the charisma of his dad, although his dad had there is something about Ricky Steamboat and Bailey, because Ricky had awkward charisma, like the selling of the bell to his neck, and some of his fired up promos were very awkward. Darren, I mean, I'm a Steamboat fan, but well, yeah.
Now, was Vic Steamboat the guy that was billed as his brother? Not
Ricky Steamboat Jr.?
No.
Okay, I might be conflating those two.
I think so, yes.
Yes, you're right.
You can say that about both.
That's the thing. Yep, that's why I'm complaining of. Yeah, Vic Steamboat is actually Ricky Steamboat's the younger brother of Ricky Steamboat, and didn't have his charisma. And then Ricky Steamboat just floundered in NXT forever,
right.
And didn't make it either. I have more memories of Vic, but Ricky was sort of the guy like, oh, he's going to be great because he's Ricky's son.
Right.
And then he got cut one day, and people were like, what? And then we never heard from him again. Yeah. But yeah, Vic Steamboat was like on the 80s WWF Superstars programs or early 90s, and they'd like go, Vic Steamboat. And he's finally getting a push. And no, then the star would come out and they'd beat him.
You wanted him to be good, but
yeah,
it just didn't happen.
Yes. Thanks for clarifying that, because I blended those two in my mind as a crowd was chatting. But yeah, Vic Steamboat. Yeah. I don't know. I think they both apply in different ways to
yes.
him. Yeah. All right, we're good. So everybody, thank you. Appreciate you being part of the show. I every time I say this, I say I don't say it enough. But if you're watching us and we're near the end here, please subscribe to our channel and please like the show. Those are two things that are very important. A third thing you can do, it takes a little bit more work than clicking twice, is commenting on the show. If you have nice things to say, put in the comments. If you have anything mean to say, just email me. I'll read it. You can take satisfaction in that. And then I'll go on with my day, because I take criticism pretty well. I've done this long enough. But feel free to, Wade, how could you think Vic and Ricky Steamboat Jr. were the same? What's wrong with you? How can we take you seriously ever again? Go ahead. Have a field day. Matt Taven hasn't been in an Undisputed Era for 3 weeks or 6 weeks. We went off on him too long. Leave Matt Taven alone. Pick on whatever. I mean, fine, do that. But if you like what we do and you want to help us, like seriously, more engagement we have in the comment section. And I don't say it enough. It does help kind of let the algorithms of YouTube know people watching the show care about what they're saying and what they're doing, and they're engaging. And we really do appreciate it. We had a few months ago, we're like, this is the week we're gonna have a lot of comments, and we did. So another call to action for people who made it this deep into the show. Also mentioned that if you're interested in being a contributor to PWTorch, we have a great team of volunteers who round out our coverage. I mean, there's just pro wrestling's so big. There's so much going on in pro wrestling, and Darrin Lilly is an example of it. Doing just a great job covering Impact and being the main writer there. We have openings for set roles on the website, and that can lead into being co-hosts on these shows. Just drop me a line at Wade Keller Podcast at gmail.com if you are interested in that. Actually, KellerWade at gmail.com is better to reach me. We're going to be changing our email addresses, but I'm trying to sort through that a little bit now. So KellerWade at gmail.com, good way to reach out. We've had some people email. We'll have some new writers on the site, and if you're interested in helping out our coverage of the aforementioned TNA or NXT or ROH, or contributing to our ongoing coverage of AEW, Raw and SmackDown, or Japan, or anything, let us know. It's something we've done from the beginning. In the late 80s, when I started the PWTorch newsletter, when I was in high school, we had a whole team of columnists. The Torch was known initially as a newsletter that brought a lot of different people with different ages and different passions and different areas of what they loved about pro wrestling into writing about pro wrestling. And so it's been kind of part of the Torch brand from the beginning, very much from the beginning stages. And I started so young, I needed other people to contribute to the newsletter. I had a lot to learn, but I loved bringing other people into the mix, and you can be part of that tradition that goes back 35 plus years. KellerWade@gmail.com. If you're willing to help us out, you can go to the staff page link at PWTorch.com to see the slots that are open at the moment, but there are other things you can do too if you're interested. And we'd love to hear from you. And Darrin is one of those people who I'm so thankful for.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Excellent. And so, check out my written report on Dynamite on the website at PWTorch.com. Same thing for SmackDown. We've got cool flashback articles going back 5, 10, 20, sometimes 30 years. My 30 years ago Raw reports we post on a weekly basis also. If you're on the YouTube side of things, but you also listen to podcasts, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever app you use. Just search Wade Keller in your podcast app. Subscribe to the red and blue logo. And then while you're at it, search PWTorch and subscribe to the PWTorch Daily Cast. We have 3 free podcast feeds with updates just about every day with new content and some really cool flashbacks, some classic interviews, and more. So check that out. And I think that, and then we have our VIP sign-up page, pwtorch.com/govip. And we are still offering our 7-day free trial if you sign up through Patreon or Spotify. The place to go is just searching PWTorch VIP in Patreon or Spotify, and that'll give you a free trial period of 7 days to before it rolls over into a paid membership. Just search PWTorch VIP in Spotify or Patreon, or pwtorch.com/govip gives you information on other ways to sign up, including the full VIP membership, which gives you access to 35 plus years of archives, our Pro Wrestling Torch newsletters dating back over 35 years to the late 1980s, an ad-free website that's desktop and mobile friendly, and more. So anyway, I just want to get those plugs in at the end because we didn't do as many early in the show. Thank you again, Darrin, and thanks to our listeners, and we'll talk to you all next time.